Hello everyone. Today we are going to talk about the coronary circulation. Basically, what coronary circulation is? Coronary circulation refers to the system of the blood vessel. What kind of blood vessel? We have the arteries and veins that supply the myocardium with oxygenated blood. What myocardium is? The myocardium is the heart muscle with the oxygenated blood and remove deoxygenated blood. If I talk about the significance of the coronary circulation, significance is basically what? The importance or the functional role of that structure in the body. The significance is that the heart requires a constant supply of oxygen and nutrient to function. This need is fulfilled by the coronary circulation. There is one more point I want to add in the significance is that it also helps to remove metabolic wastes such as CO2, lactic acids from cardiac tissues. From cardiac tissue. Now let's move on to the further division of the coronary circulation. As it includes the arteries and veins, here I'm going to talk about the coronary arteries. Let's talk about its origin. Origin is the point basically from where the structure arises. Both coronary artery, the right and the left, originates from ascending aorta just above the aortic valve at the aortic sinus. If I talk about their courses, what the courses are, the path or the route the artery follows. The right and the left coronary artery arise from the ascending aorta immediately above the aortic wall. Then the second they run in the coronary sulcus, then reaches up to the interventricular groove and they send their branches along these grooves. Here we can see in that structure, here is our ascending aorta. By removing it, we remove it. From here we can see that there is the aortic sinus or we can say aortic valve. From here, we can see easily that here is the opening of the right coronary artery, and here is the right coronary artery, and here is the left coronary artery opening, and from here the left coronary artery runs. Let me tell you briefly. From here, the left coronary artery you can see arises, and here is the right coronary artery. You can easily see from here, and they also send branches along the interventricular grooves. Here we can see that there is the anterior interventricular groove or the sulcus, and here is the posterior interventricular groove or sulcus. These grooves are basically what? These separates the right ventricle from the left ventricle. Further, further we can see the nature of the coronary arteries. They are the functional end arteries, what means they have minimum anastomosis. And the blockage of coronary arteries causes the myocardial infarction. Let's further move on to the division of the coronary arteries. There are the right coronary artery and the left coronary artery. Here I'm going to talk about the right coronary artery. Let's talk about its origin. Its origin is from the anterior aortic sinus of the ascending aorta. From here we can see that anterior aortic sinus. Uh, here, here is the opening of the right coronary artery. This part is the anterior one. This and these two are the posterior ones, which are the right and the left. Right and the left. If I talk about its courses, this artery runs between the pulmonary trunk and the right auricle. From here we can see that there is the pulmonary trunk and here is the right auricle. Here is the right auricle. This artery runs between them inside the atrioventricular sulcus, or we can say the coronary sulcus. Then this artery turns posteriorly around the inferior border of the heart. Here we can see that this hole is the inferior border and enters the posterior atrioventricular sulcus. This one is the posterior atrioventricular sulcus, reaching the crux of the heart. Reaching the crux of the heart. Basically, what it is, the junction. Let me write it properly. uh, Junction of inter interatrial and interventricular septa. Interventricular septa. If I talk about the branches of the right coronary artery, first we have the nodal branch, which is also known as the SA nodal branch, which supplies the SA node. This is most probably supplies in mostly 60% of the peoples. Then we have the second branch, which is called the right atrial branch, which supplies to the right atrium. Then we have the another branch, which is called the marginal branch, which runs along the acute margin, acute margin of the heart and supplies right ventricle. Then we have the posterior interventricular branch. This branch runs in posterior interventricular groove and supplies the posterior one-third of the interventricular septum. Then we have the further terminal branches, which anastomoses with branches of the left coronary artery, left coronary artery near the apex. If I talk about the area of distribution, let's first go to the diagrammatic view. Talk about the branches. Here we have the right coronary artery. It has first branch, which is called the right atrial branch. Then further here we have the right nodal branch, or we said the sinoatrial nodal artery. Then coronary artery also give a branch which runs acute to the heart, which runs acute margin of the heart, which is the right marginal artery, and it runs back into the posterior interventricular groove. These are the branches of the right coronary artery. And if I talk about the area of distribution, first we have the right atrium. It supplies the right atrium. Second, it also supplies the of the um, most of the right ventricle, and on third it supplies the posterior part of left ventricle. Fourth, it supplies the posterior one third of interventricular septum. Further, it supplies the SC node in 60% of the people. And the last, it supplies the AV node. These two parts are supplied by the posterior interventricular branch. We have finished here with the right coronary artery. Then moving on further towards the left coronary artery. If I talk about its origin, it originates from the left posterior aortic sinus of the ascending aorta. Here we can say, here easily you can see that this is the aortic valve, and from here we can see that opening of the left coronary artery, and here the coronary artery arises and runs. If I talk about its courses, it passes. If I talk about its courses, it passes between the pulmonary trunk, and left auricle. Here you can see that it is running between the pulmonary trunk and the left auricle. This one is our left auricle and it is running between the pulmonary trunk. This one is the pulmonary trunk and this one is our left auricle. It is running between them. Then we have the second part, which is the dividation of the left coronary artery. Division of left coronary artery into its two main branches. Let me write it properly. Two main branches. The first one is the anterior interventricular branch, and the second is the circumflex branch. Then moving further towards the branches of the left coronary artery, the first one is the left interventricular branch. It is run in the anterior interventricular groove, and supplies two-thirds of interventricular septum. Then another branch we have the circumflex branch, which runs in the left which runs in the left atrioventriculus sulcus. Then we have the another branch, which is called the diagonal branches from LAD to anterior wall of left ventricle, And the last we have the left atrial branches which supply to the left atrium. Here I forgot to mention circumflex branch gives left marginal and posterolateral branches which further supplies the left atrium and the left ventricle. Let's look at the diagram about the branches. Here we have the left coronary artery. Here you can see that left atrial branch which supplies the left atrium. Then here we have the anterior interventricular branch. And from here you can see that this is giving rise to the lateral diagonal branch of the anterior interventricular artery. Then from here we can see that this is our circumflex branch. This is our circumflex branch which gives origin to the left marginal branches, and behind it gives the left posterolateral branches. If I talk about the area of the distribution of the left coronary artery, it supplies the left atrium, most of the left ventricle. Third, it supplies the part of right ventricle with the help of which branch? Here we have to write the LAD, which is the branch of the anterior interventricular branch. Then it supplies the anterior two-third of, write it properly, anterior two-third of interventricular septum. The one-third part is supplied by the, here you can see that the one-third part is supplied by the posterior interventricular septum. One-third part is supplied by the artery which is known as the posterior interventricular artery, which is the branch of the right coronary artery. And the fifth part, which is supplied by the left coronary artery, is the SA node in the remaining 40% people. Then further study some additional concepts, that what is coronary dominance. The coronary dominance is basically the artery giving the posterior interventricular branch, this branch, posterior interventricular branch. Sometimes this artery originates from the right coronary artery. In this such cases, the heart is called the right dominance heart. In further 10% of cases, the circumflex artery, which is the continuation of the left coronary artery, here you can see that the circumflex artery, which is the continuation of the left coronary artery, provide posterior interventricular branch, and these such heart called the left dominant heart or the left dominance. If I talk about the if I talk about some clinical correlation, there we have the myocardial infection, which is caused by um, which is caused by occlusion of coronary artery, which is basically the necrosis of myocardium. Myocardium. The common sites where the myocardial infarction occurs. The first one is the anterior interventricular branch. This is the most common site where the myocardial infarction occurs. The second one is the right coronary artery, and the third one is the circumflex branch. Then another one we have the angina pectoris. What basically the angina pectoris is? The chest pain due to chest pain due to temporary myocardial ischemia. It is relieved by rest, or we can say the nitroglycerins. Let's end this topic by studying the coronary angiography and the coronary angioplasty. What basically the coronary angiography? Coronary angiography is a diagnostic test, is a diagnostic test uses X-rays to detect, or we can say to visualize the coronary arteries. And what basically the angioplasty is? Angioplasty is also called the percutaneous percutaneous coronary intervention (PCI) is a treatment procedure to open blocked or narrowed coronary arteries. Here I have covered all the necessary information regarding the coronary circulation, consisting of coronary arteries, the right coronary arteries, its branches, area of distribution, the left coronary artery, its branches, area of distribution, and some additional concept.
We will be continuing with the vessels of the heart, covering the venous drainage of the heart and the cardiac conduction system. We will see how the cardiac veins accompany the arteries, how they drain into the coronary sinus, and then explore how the electrical impulses travel through the heart to coordinate the contraction. We will first begin with the venous drainage. Coming to the venous drainage of the heart, we must first know about the coronary sinus. The coronary sinus is the primary venous drainage pathway of the heart. It collects deoxygenated blood from most of the cardiac veins and empties it into the right atrium. It lies posterior to the coronary sulcus between the left atrium and the left ventricle and measures about 2.5 centimeters in length. Its opening is guarded by the Thebesian valve. Now we will first cover the major tributaries of the coronary sinus, and then we will see how these tributaries accompany respective arteries. Coming to the tributaries, we have the great cardiac vein, which runs in the anterior interventricular sulcus and curves around the left margin of the heart and drains into the left end of the coronary sinus. Secondly, we have the middle cardiac vein, also known as the posterior interventricular vein. It ascends in the posterior interventricular sulcus and joins the coronary sinus at the right end. Then we have the small cardiac vein, which courses in the right atrioventricular groove and drains into the right side of the coronary sinus. The posterior vein of the left ventricle, it lies on the diaphragmatic surface and drains directly into the coronary sinus. Then we have the oblique vein of the left atrium, which is a remnant of the superior vena cava, joining the left end of the sinus. In addition to that, we have some small veins like the anterior cardiac veins which drain directly into the right atrium. Now let's take a quick look at the anatomical views from Netter's atlas. The first image shows the sternocostal surface of the heart, the anterior view, where you can see the right coronary artery, the left coronary artery, and their major branches along the anterior cardiac vein. Now, the second image shows the diaphragmatic surface or the posterior inferior view of the heart, where we can clearly identify the coronary sinus, the great cardiac vein, middle cardiac vein, and small cardiac vein, all draining into the right atrium. Now, as you can already see, I have a simplified diagram of the heart showing all the major coronary arteries. In this segment, we will draw each cardiac vein as they follow the arteries. With this, we will be it will be easy for us to think of the veins traveling alongside the arteries and converging towards the coronary sinus. In this diagram that I have drawn, you can clearly see the anterior surface of the heart viewed from the right side, and on the other side we have the posterior surface of the heart. To make our lives easier, I will be drawing the structures present on the anterior surface with a darker color, while those which are on the posterior surface will be drawn with a lighter color, or they may be dotted. First and foremost, I will be drawing the coronary sinus. Now, as we already know, the coronary sinus is the principal venous channel of the heart, meaning it collects most of the deoxygenated blood from the myocardium and empties it into the right atrium. Alongside that, it lies in the posterior part of the coronary sulcus between the left atrium and left ventricle and is approximately 2.5 centimeters long. Coming to the first tributary, we have the great cardiac vein. Now we know this vein begins in the anterior interventricular sulcus alongside the anterior interventricular artery. Drawing it like this. Now it comes to the anterior surface, traveling in the anterior interventricular sulcus alongside the anterior interventricular artery. From there, it swings around the left margin of the heart in the left atrioventricular groove, like this. From there, it travels entering the left end of the coronary sinus. So something like this. Because it follows the anterior interventricular artery, it drains the anterior walls of both the ventricles and anterior 2/3 of the interventricular septum. Coming to the next tributary, we have the middle cardiac vein. This vein follows the posterior interventricular artery and runs in the posterior interventricular sulcus. Something like this. Here, the middle cardiac vein collects the blood from the posterior part of both ventricles and posterior septum before joining the coronary sinus at its right end. Then we have our next tributary, which is the small cardiac vein. It will course in the right atrioventricular groove alongside the right marginal artery. As we can see here, once it crosses over, it will run alongside the right marginal artery, something like this. and drain the right ventricle's inferior and diaphragmatic surfaces. It empties into the right portion of the coronary sinus. The next tributary is the posterior vein of the left ventricle. Now this vein lies on the posterior wall of the left ventricle, drains that area directly into the coronary sinus rather than traveling in a groove. Next tributary we have is the oblique vein of the left atrium. Now this is a remnant of the left superior vena cava. This vein descends on the posterior wall of the left atrium and joins the coronary sinus near its left end. We have the anterior cardiac veins. Now these veins bypass the coronary sinus entirely and drain directly from the anterior surface of the right ventricle into the right atrium. Now, as we can see, that all the tributaries funnel into the coronary sinus, creating a venous convergence highway that returns blood to the right atrium. Coming towards the next topic of our video, we have the cardiac conduction system. We can say that this is the built-in electrical wiring of the heart, which ensures rhythmic coordination of contraction. At the top of the chain, we have the sinoatrial node, which is the primary pacemaker. It is located at the junction of the superior vena cava and right atrium near the crista terminalis. It normally fires 60 to 100 beats per minute. Its perfusion comes mainly from the sinoatrial nodal artery, most often a branch of the right coronary artery. Next, we have the atrioventricular node or the AV node. From the sinoatrial node, the impulses spread over the atria and reaches the AV node. Now, the AV node, this allows for the slow conduction briefly to allow full atrial contraction before the ventricular activation. Its blood supply is typically from the AV nodal artery, again originating from the right coronary artery. If we talk about the anatomical position of this node, it is located near the opening of the coronary sinus, just above the septal cusp of the tricuspid valve. From the AV node, the signals travel through the atrioventricular bundle, also known as the bundle of His, which penetrates the fibrous skeleton of the heart into the membranous portion of the interventricular septum. It then divides into the right and left bundle branches. The right branch travels down the right side of the septums and gives off a limb into the moderator band, which connects to the anterior papillary muscles, while the left branch breaks into the anterior posterior fascicles to supply the left ventricle. Finally, conduction reaches the Purkinje fibers, a subendocardial plexus that spreads rapidly throughout the ventricles and papillary muscles, ensuring near simultaneous activation of the ventricular myocardium. Now, to recap everything we have studied about the cardiac conduction, I will make a simplified flowchart for better memory retention. As you can see, we have the flowchart for the cardiac conduction system. First, we have the SA node. Here the impulse starts. It is also known as a pacemaker and spreads through both atria, causing atrial contraction. These signals pass through the internodal pathways to the AV node in the interatrial septum. Now the AV node, it introduces a short delay to around 0.1 seconds to allow for ventricles to fill completely before they contract. From here we go to the bundle of His. The impulse passes through the bundle of His, the only link between the atria and the ventricles. The bundle divides itself into the right and left bundle branches running down the septum. Then we have the Purkinje fibers which spread the impulse through the ventricular walls. With that, we've concluded both our topics, the cardiac conduction system and the venous drainage of the heart. This is Anima Anatomia, and we look forward to seeing you in our next videos. Thank you so much for watching.